It is 5:47 in the morning. The city hasn't woken up yet. The coffee shops are still dark. The streets are quiet. But you are already awake, sitting at a desk that isn't yours. Inside a building you had to badge into with a temporary ID that expires in 12 weeks, staring at a screen filled with numbers that, right now, you barely understand. You are 22 years old. You have a finance degree from a school that cost your family more than they will ever say out loud. You did 3 internships. You sent 140 applications. You got 4 interviews. You got 1 offer. And here you are. Level 1, the intern. The fund is called something that sounds like it was designed to intimidate, a single surname, or 2 initials, or a name borrowed from Greek mythology. The office is glass and steel. The carpet costs more per square foot than your monthly rent. The people who walk through the door in the morning do not make eye contact with you. Not because they are rude, because they are already thinking, your job for now is to not be useless. You make copies of pitch books that were already made. You run sensitivity analyses that will never be read. You sit in the back of meetings with a yellow legal pad and write down words you'll look up later. EBITDA, wax free cash flow conversion. You nod as if you understand the context. You are learning the language of a world that was built before you arrived and will continue long after you leave. There are 7 other interns. You watch them. All of them are smart. Several of them are brilliant. One of them went to Oxford. One of them already has a CFA level 1. You measure yourself against each of them in silence, the way competitive people always do, constantly, privately, without ever admitting it. The hours are not what anyone warned you about. The warnings were accurate. They were just somehow insufficient. You are there before the senior analysts arrive and still there when the cleaning staff comes through at 10. You eat dinner from a delivery app at your desk. You learn to sleep fast. You learn to look alert when you are not. But something is happening underneath the exhaustion. You are starting to see patterns. Not in the markets yet, that comes later, but in the building itself, in how the senior analysts speak in shorthand about companies the way surgeons speak about patients, in how the portfolio managers walk differently on days when a position is working versus days when it isn't, in how the whole office has a mood, a pressure system, and you are learning to read it. At the end of 12 weeks, they tell 2 of the 7 interns that there might be a full-time role. You are one of them. Level 2. The junior analyst. You are now paid, not well. Not compared to what this industry will eventually pay you, but enough to justify the sacrifice. Enough to tell your parents something real. Your job is the model. Not a single model. Not a clean model. The model, a sprawling, inherited, color-coded Excel file that no one fully understands, that has been passed down through 3 generations of analysts, that contains formulas referencing cells in tabs that haven't been opened in 2 years. Your job is to maintain it, update it, and make it not embarrass the fund when it gets presented to the portfolio manager. You spend your first month just learning what it's measuring. Your third month building a cleaner version on the side that you hope someone eventually notices. The work is granular in a way that feels almost personal. You are building a 3-statement model for a specialty chemicals company with operations in 6 countries, and a pension liability that the last analyst marked as manageable, without ever actually calculating. You calculate it, the number is not manageable. You flag it, the senior analyst tells you to leave it for now. You leave it, you do not forget it. You are learning what the industry actually values, not creativity, not personality, not the ability to explain complex things in simple language, not yet. Right now, the industry values precision speed, the ability to sit for 14 hours and not make arithmetic errors, the ability to take a brutal amount of feedback without becoming defensive or deflated. You take the feedback, you do not become deflated, you become sharper. Level 3. The analyst. 2 years in, you are different. You are faster, you are harder to impress. You have developed the particular kind of tiredness that comes not from lack of sleep, but from sustained mental pressure. The tiredness of someone who has been paying very close attention for a very long time. You now own your models. You build them from scratch. You defend them in internal meetings where the portfolio manager asks questions designed to find weaknesses, and sometimes your answers are good, and sometimes they are not, and you are learning the difference in real time, in front of people whose respect you are still trying to earn. You cover 3 sectors: industrials, consumer discretionary, and a sub-segment of healthcare that you have become something close to expert in. Not because you planned to, but because 2 years ago you picked up a name no one else wanted, and you never put it down. The fund is watching you. You do not fully know this yet, but you will. And somewhere in the building, several floors above where you are sitting right now, in a quieter office with better furniture, and a view of the city that doesn't include the parking garage, a portfolio manager is having a conversation about you. Level 4, the senior analyst. Nobody gives you a ceremony. Nobody pulls you aside and says the words you spent 3 years mentally rehearsing. One day you are presenting ideas for approval, and the next day you are being asked which ideas are worth your time to present. The shift is that quiet. The shift is that complete. You are now responsible for a book, a portfolio of names you have built over years of slow, methodical accumulation. 23 companies, 7 sectors tangentially, 3 core long positions that represent a meaningful percentage of the fund's gross exposure. When those positions move, you feel it before you see it. Physically, a kind of background awareness that never fully turns off. You have developed what traders call conviction. It is not confidence in the ordinary sense. Confidence is when you believe something because you've been told it's true. Conviction is when you believe something because you've built the evidence yourself. Stress, tested it in every direction, and it still holds. Conviction is uncomfortable because it means you are personally accountable for the belief. You are accountable. The fund had a rough Q3. The macro environment turned and caught 2 of your positions from the wrong side. You lost money, not catastrophically, but meaningfully. The portfolio manager did not yell. He asked questions in a very calm voice, the kind of calm that only comes from someone who has been in the industry long enough to know that panic changes nothing. You answered every question. You updated every model. You did not defend the positions beyond what the data supported. One of the positions you cut, one of them you added to. The one you added to recovered. Nobody said, "Good call." In this industry, a recovering position is not a compliment. It is the baseline. The baseline is that you are right. The floor is that you are right. Being wrong is what you work with a junior analyst now. Your first direct report, he is 24, from a good school, sharper than you were at that age, and slightly too eager to give opinions before he has built the evidence to support them. You recognize this because you were exactly the same. You do not tell him this. You give him a name to cover and wait to see how he handles it. He handles it well. You feel something you did not expect. Pride brief, restrained, but it is there. And with it comes a realization that the work is not only about the money and the models. It is about building something, a way of thinking, a standard, a culture that gets transmitted from person to person the same way the models do, from one generation of analysts to the next. Level 5. The portfolio manager. The title changes. The weight changes more. You are no longer just responsible for your analysis. You are responsible for capital. Real capital. Not theoretical allocations in a hypothetical portfolio. Real money belonging to real institutions, pension funds, university endowments, sovereign wealth funds, organizations whose obligations are denominated in the retirement security of teachers, the financial stability of hospitals, the long-term solvency of countries. The abstraction is gone. What remains is a number, updated in real time, that reflects the consequence of every decision you make or fail to make. You manage a sleeve of the fund, concentrated long-short, 15 to 20 names at any one time. You have a maximum gross exposure, a maximum net, a stop-loss framework that exists on paper, but in practice lives in your head as a constant background calculation. You know at any moment what a 3 standard deviation move in any of your core positions would do to your P&L. You know it the way you know your own name. The market has changed since you entered the industry. It is faster, more crowded information that used to take days to travel from a company's earnings call to the models of the major funds now moves in seconds, processed by systems that do not need to sleep. The edge is no longer in getting the information. The edge is in what you do with it, interpretation. Context, the ability to see what the model says and know when the model is wrong. You have been wrong. Publicly, measurably, expensively wrong. Once on a retail name where you read the consumer data correctly, but misjudged the competitive response. Once on a biotech where the phase 2 data was better than you expected, but the market was already pricing something better still. You absorbed both. You updated both. You did not internalize them as identity. You internalized them as information. This distinction between failure as information and failure as identity is, you have come to believe, the only real psychological advantage that separates the people who stay in this industry from the ones who leave. The people who leave are not less intelligent. They are not less hardworking. They are the ones for whom being wrong, even once, costs too much. Level 6. The senior portfolio manager. You have been tested enough to know your own architecture. You know how you think under pressure. You know how you think under boredom, which is its own kind of pressure, the pressure of a period when nothing is interesting, and the fund is grinding, and every day feels like a repetition of the last. You know the difference between a thesis you believe and a thesis you are holding on to because selling it would mean admitting you were wrong. You are now managing a team 3 analysts below you, a junior PM you are developing, a research budget that gets reviewed quarterly. You sit in the senior investment committee meetings, not as a visitor, not as someone presenting for approval, but as a decision maker. Your opinion shapes the fund's direction. Your read on a sector, offered casually in a Tuesday morning meeting, can move capital. The responsibility does not feel like pressure anymore. It feels like weather, constant, ambient. Something you live inside of. You have stopped thinking about the next level, which is precisely when it becomes available. Level 7, the deputy CIO. There is a moment, it happens differently for everyone, but it happens when you realize that the industry you spent a decade learning to navigate has itself changed around you. The strategies that defined your early career have been arbed away by quantitative funds with processing power you cannot match. The information advantages that used to create alpha have been compressed to microseconds. What remains, what has always remained for the funds that survive long enough to matter, is judgment, not quantitative judgment, qualitative judgment. The ability to sit across the table from a management team and know whether they believe what they're saying. The ability to hear a thesis that is technically correct and still know it is wrong. The ability to maintain a position through volatility when the data says hold and everything in your nervous system says sell. As deputy CIO, you are now the second voice in the room that matters most. The CIO sets the philosophy. You execute the philosophy. You translate a worldview about markets into a portfolio, name by name, position by position, risk parameter by risk parameter. It is architectural work. It requires you to hold the whole structure in your head simultaneously, to see not just whether any individual position is correct, but whether the portfolio as a system is correctly calibrated. You have started to think less about individual companies and more about regimes. Market regimes, the environments in which certain types of businesses thrive and certain types die. You think about correlation, not just between the positions you hold, but between the positions you hold and the hidden risk factors that connect them in ways no model fully captures. You think about the difference between risk you are being paid to take and risk you are carrying without compensation. You sleep, but the sleep is different now. It is not the deep, indifferent sleep of the intern who falls unconscious out of exhaustion. It is the sleep of someone who has their phone next to their head because a position might need managing overnight, because Tokyo opens while you are asleep, because something can happen in the hours between midnight and 6 that requires a decision before New York opens. Your marriage, or your relationships, or your friendships, the specific form doesn't matter, has had to accommodate this. The people in your life have had to learn to live with someone who is never fully off. Some of them have made their peace with it, some of them have not. You do not discuss this at work. Nobody does. Level 8, the Chief Investment Officer. You control capital now. Every position you open can move millions, but instead of freedom, you feel something closer to constraint. A weight that distributes itself evenly across every hour of every day, that does not lift when markets close, that does not lift on weekends, that is present even in the moments of apparent victory. Because every victory contains within it the setup for a future loss. You are responsible for the fund's philosophy, the fund's positioning, the fund's returns, not in the abstract, but in the specific, quarterly, annually, measured against benchmarks and against competitors, and against the expectations of investors who have allocated capital to you because they believed you were capable of generating returns they could not generate themselves. The markets move overnight without permission. Sleep has become a managed risk. You have a research team that monitors positions while you are offline, but the decisions, the real decisions, the ones that require judgment, those are yours. A geopolitical development at 2 a.m. in a region where you have exposure does not wait for you to finish sleeping. You think about risk differently now. You have lost enough money, not your money, the fund's money, your investors' money, to understand that risk is not a number in a model. Risk is what happens to a portfolio when the model fails, when the correlations that were supposed to dampen volatility instead amplify it, when the liquidity you assumed existed disappears in the exact moment you need to sell. You have managed through at least one genuine crisis, maybe two, the kind where the entire financial system behaves in ways that the historical data said were essentially impossible. The kind where experienced people, serious people, people with decades of market history in their heads, looked at their screens and genuinely did not know what would happen next. You did not freeze. You made decisions with incomplete information, under time pressure, in an environment where every option was bad, and the task was simply to identify which option was least bad. Some of those decisions were right, some were wrong, the fund survived, you survived. What the crisis left behind was not trauma, exactly. It was calibration. A cleaner understanding of the difference between a permanent adjustment in how much confidence you are willing to have in any single view. Level 9, the managing partner. You are no longer only an investor, you are an institution. The fund's performance is your name. The fund's culture is your legacy. The people you have hired, trained, promoted, and occasionally let go. They carry your standards forward into every analysis they will ever write, every investment decision they will ever make, every junior analyst they will one day develop themselves. You think about this more than you expected, the transmission. The idea that what you built will continue after you step back, that the discipline, the intellectual rigor, the insistence on building the evidence before forming the opinion, the refusal to hold a position past the point where the thesis is broken, these things will persist, not because anyone wrote them down, but because they were modeled over years by the people who set the standard. The fund manages billions. The numbers are large enough that they have become abstract in a different way than they were when you were an intern. When you were 22, $1 million was a figure you could not fully comprehend. Now you think in basis points of the portfolio. A 10 basis point position is $100 million. You moved past the sensation of those numbers years ago. What you have not moved past is the responsibility. Level 10, you built this. Not metaphorically, not in the vague, inspirational sense that people use the word built when they mean they participated in something. You built this literally. The name on the door is yours. The philosophy of the fund, the specific, idiosyncratic, hard-won set of beliefs about how markets work and where inefficiency lives, and how to construct a portfolio that can survive conditions no model predicts. That philosophy came from you, from the years of being wrong, from the years of being right, from every position you ever held past where you should have, and every position you ever sold before it fully ran, and everything you learned from both. The fund started with one strategy and two people. You and someone you trusted, a partner you had known since the early years, someone whose judgment complemented yours in the specific way that good partnerships always work, not by agreeing, but by disagreeing well, by having a process that turned disagreement into a better decision rather than a louder argument. There were years when the fund almost didn't make it. Not in the way that gets written about afterward, not the romantic near-death story that becomes part of the mythology. In the real way, the unglamorous way, the way where the assets under management drop fast enough that your operating costs become existential, where key people start taking calls from other funds, where you wake up at 4 a.m. and run the numbers on the back of a mental notepad, and the numbers are not reassuring. You did not quit. Not because quitting would have been wrong, but because quitting would have meant that the thesis, your thesis, the one you built the entire enterprise around, was not what you believed it to be, and you believed it not blindly. With evidence, with stress tests and counterarguments and years of watching it work in conditions where simpler approaches broke down, the fund survived, the assets recovered, the team held, and now you sit in a building you chose, running a fund you designed, with a team you developed, managing capital for investors who chose you specifically. Not a brand, not a bank, not a name with decades of institutional momentum behind it. This is not contentment. Exactly. You are not sure the people who make it to this level are built for contentment. What you feel is something closer to engagement. A deep, sustained engagement with a problem that is never fully solved, a market that is never fully understood, a portfolio that is never finished. You have been in this industry for over 2 decades. In that time, you have watched the landscape change in ways that would have seemed impossible when you were the intern with the temporary badge. The rise of quantitative strategies, the compression of traditional long-short alpha, the entrance of new capital from new geographies, the evolution of technology from a tool you used to a competitor you managed against, the increasing complexity of the macro environment, the intersection of monetary policy, geopolitics, supply chain fragility, and technological disruption that now makes every investment thesis at least partly a macro thesis, whether you want it to be or not. You have adapted. Not because you were flexible by nature, you are, if anything, stubborn, but because the fund required adaptation and you were not willing to let the fund fail. What you have learned, the real knowledge, the kind that cannot be downloaded or summarized or compressed into a framework, is that this industry is a compression of human judgment under pressure. Everything else, the models, the data, the technology, the process, is infrastructure for that judgment. The infrastructure matters, but it serves the judgment. It does not replace it. The best investors you have known were not the most brilliant. They were the most honest about what they knew, honest about what they didn't, honest about when a thesis was broken versus when it was merely uncomfortable, honest in the face of their own psychology, the ego, the loss aversion, the narrative instinct that makes the human brain construct compelling stories around positions that the data no longer supports. Intellectual honesty, repeated over thousands of decisions, across years of market cycles, under the continuous pressure of accountability. That is the craft. Everything else is vocabulary. You are not young anymore. Your hair has changed. Your reading glasses live on your desk now instead of in a drawer. The junior analysts on your team were born in years that, when you say them aloud, register in your body as a small, quiet shock. They have not lived through what you have lived through. They have not been through the cycles that shaped your understanding of how fragile the system actually is beneath its apparent stability. But they are good, you can see it. The way they argue with each other in the morning research meetings, not to win, but to find the truth. The way they hold positions under pressure without becoming emotional. The way they update when the data changes. You watch them, and you see something you recognize. Somewhere in this building, it is 5:47 in the morning, a 22-year. Old with a temporary badge is sitting at a desk that isn't theirs, staring at a screen full of numbers they barely understand. They are terrified and ambitious in equal measure. They are trying to speak a language they have only just begun to learn. They are watching the senior analysts the way, years ago, you watched yours. They do not know yet what this will cost them. They do not know yet what it will give them. They do not know that somewhere in this building, several floors above where they are sitting, in a quieter office with better furniture and a view of the city that doesn't include the parking garage, someone is already watching them. The system continues. It always does.